The woods around the camp were quiet in the way forests sometimes get before something terrible happens. Wind slid through the tall pines, pushing branches together with a soft scraping sound. The lake nearby reflected the moon like black glass. Then, the screaming started. One camp counselor ran through the trees, tripping over roots. Blood splattered across her shirt. Behind her, something huge moved through the forest, like a tank pushing through brush. Jason Voorhees stepped into the clearing. The moonlight reflected off his hockey mask. In his hand, a long machete hung loosely at his side. The counselor froze for half a second, staring at the towering figure in front of her friend, who was already split open on the ground. Jason raised the blade. One swing. The machete cut through the air with a wet, brutal sound. The counselor didn't even have time to scream. Miles away on a lonely highway, a transport van lay flipped on its side, smoke pouring from the engine. The back doors were torn open. 2 guards lay dead in the road. Standing beside the wreckage was another silent shape. Michael Myers. His white mask was cracked from the crash, but his head slowly turned toward the dark woods in the distance, almost like he could feel something. Then, he started walking. Back at the camp, Jason moved through the cabins like a storm. Another counselor tried to escape out the back door. Jason grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wooden wall hard enough to crack the boards. The machete rose again. Then, Jason stopped. A presence had entered the clearing. Across the campsite stood another figure, tall, silent, mask staring forward. Michael Myers. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Then Jason stepped forward. Michael stepped forward too. 2 monsters from different nightmares walking toward each other. Jason lifted his machete. Michael raised his own blade, and in the same instant, they both swung. The machetes collided with a loud metallic crack. The blades locked together. For a split second, they stood there, strength pushing against strength, mask staring into mask. Then, a counselor screamed. A young woman had bolted from behind a cabin, sprinting across the camp toward the woods. Michael's head turned. Without hesitation, he ripped the machete free from the clash and hurled it across the clearing. The blade spun once through the air, then buried itself straight through her torso. She dropped instantly. Jason slowly tilted his head sideways, staring at Michael. Michael stared back. Something passed between them. Not words, understanding. They both walked toward the fallen counselor. Michael reached down and yanked the machete from her body with a wet sound. Jason raised his own blade, and together they began hacking. Ferocious swings, metal flashing under the moonlight. The forest filled with brutal rhythmic strikes. 2 silent killers sharing the same moment of violence. When it was finished, neither of them looked away. Something had changed. Neither of them could speak, but they had recognized something in each other. The same endless hunger. From that moment forward, they moved together. Not as rivals, but as a unit. What followed became impossible for the authorities to explain. Bodies started appearing across the region. First the camp, then the next town, then the highways. Security cameras caught glimpses of them, walking side by side, Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers moving like shadows through neighborhoods, forests, and empty roads. Nothing slowed them. Police bullets didn't stop them. SWAT teams tried and failed. Helicopters tracked them from the air, only to lose them in the woods. The body count climbed. 50, 70, 100. Soon it was far beyond that. News channels called them the Kill Squad, 2 silent figures, 2 unstoppable forces, moving like a storm across the map. Eventually, the government stepped in. Military advisors studied everything they had: video footage, autopsy reports, ballistics tests. None of it made sense. Jason Voorhees had died multiple times. Michael Myers had survived wounds that should have killed any human. The final conclusion was simple. They weren't dealing with humans. They were dealing with something else entirely. So they created a plan. If bullets didn't stop them, they would use something bigger, a miniature nuclear device. The trap was set in an abandoned industrial zone, miles outside the nearest town. Military teams waited in bunkers miles away. Drones watched from the sky. Jason and Michael walked into the zone like they always did. Slow, silent, unstoppable. When they reached the center, the bomb detonated. A blinding white flash swallowed the entire landscape. The explosion flattened buildings and turned metal into molten slag. Everything within miles was reduced to ash. For days afterward, military teams searched the crater. They expected nothing, just vaporized remains. But then, a drone camera caught movement. Something huge was standing in the smoking crater. The figure stepped forward slowly. Jason Voorhees. But he wasn't the same. He had grown massively, 7 feet 5 inches tall, at least 500 pounds of muscle, and something darker beneath it. His body looked swollen with unnatural strength. His mask cracked, but still intact. Military analysts began to piece together a terrifying theory. Years earlier, Jason's mother had used a forbidden book to bring him back from death. The same ancient power rumored to raise deadites. When the nuclear blast hit him, that dark energy hadn't destroyed him. It had fed him, amplified him. And as the smoke cleared behind the giant figure, another shape walked out beside him. Michael Myers. Unburned, unbroken, still silent, still watching. The 2 monsters stood together again in the center of the crater. The world had just thrown its most powerful weapon at them, and they had walked out of it. Where they would go next, what towns would fall, how many more bodies would pile up. No one knew, but one thing had become terrifyingly clear. Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers were no longer just legends. They were a moving apocalypse, and now they were hunting together.